Magnífico y excelentísimo señor presidente, excelentísimos señores vicepresidentes, estimado señor Carreras, muy señores míos. Para la musicología saarense y para toda esta universidad, el día de hoy es un día excepcional. Queremos rendir homenaje a uno de los músicos más destacados y más ilustres de nuestra época. José Carreras es a la vez un intérprete inigualable del repertorio operístico y personaje de la música conocido mundialmente. Yo mismo he tenido el placer de escucharle en la Ópera de París en los años 80, entonces todavía en el Palais Garnier, con un balo en máscara, y tengo que confesar que todavía me suena como usted ha cantado La Rivedrò nell'Estasi al comienzo de la ópera. Fue una noche de ópera inolvidable. Para nuestra universidad y para mí personalmente es un gran honor que usted esté con nosotros en este acto académico. Deseo dar las gracias a mi amigo Thomas Duis, pianista y catedrático de la Hochschule für Musik Saar, por su aportación musical. Thomas Duis ha elegido dos piezas del gran compositor y pianista catalán Enrique Granados, víctima de la guerra submarina alemana en la Primera Guerra Mundial. Deseo agradecer igualmente a todo mi equipo del Instituto de Musicología, especialmente a nuestra administradora Brigitte Wojtyniak. Finalmente, a la doctora Gabriele Kröner y a Ina Hönninger de la Deutsche José Carreras Leukämie-Stiftung en Múnich por la buena cooperación en la preparación de este acto. Paso la palabra al presidente de nuestra universidad, el profesor Volker Lineweber.
Señor Carreras, Mr. Carreras, sehr geehrter Herr Carreras, meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren, ich habe einige zu begrüßen, und das mache ich zunächst auf Deutsch, die uns mit ihrer Anwesenheit beehren. Thomas Duis, mein lieber Freund und Co-Leiter einer saarländischen Hochschule, vielen Dank für die Einführung, das war fantastisch. Du hast mir ein wenig erläutert, dass du dich neu in dieses Stück hineingearbeitet hast. Ich hoffe, es hat dir auch Freude gemacht. Vielen Dank. Ich begrüße den Minister für Bildung und Kultur, Herrn Commerçant, als auch zuständigen Minister für diese Universität, zwar nicht primär, aber auch, und es freut mich sehr, dass Sie die Zeit gefunden haben, Commerçant zu kommen. Als Beauftragte der Ministerpräsidentin für Wissenschaft, der Ministerpräsidentin und zuständigen Ministerin quasi für Wissenschaft und Forschung, Technologie, Dr. Reichrath, herzlich willkommen, dass auch Sie in Ihrem neuen Amt uns heute beehren. Herrn Ehrensenator Deutsch habe ich eben schon persönlich begrüßt. Ich freue mich sehr, dass er mit seiner verehrten Frau Gemahlin so regelmäßig an solchen Veranstaltungen teilnimmt und damit dokumentiert, wie, ich sag mal, generationsübergreifend Hochschulen heute aufgestellt sein sollten. Als neuen Rektor der Hochschule für Musik begrüße ich Wolfgang Meyer, ganz herzlich willkommen, und als aus der Fakultät für Medizin uns vertrautes und nettes Duo begrüße ich den Herrn Dekan Menger und den Herrn Prodekan Hermann, der sich in den hinteren Reihen etwas versteckt hat. Natürlich begrüße ich an dieser Stelle Herrn Professor Roemer als Geschäftsführer des José Carreras Centers for Immuno and Gene Therapy. Welcome and thank you for coming. It's a great day for Saarlandes University, and I can frankly say the honor is on both sides. From my point of view, more on our side than I suspect it could be on your side, since we are simply more people than you are. You are unique. You are one person, and we are a lot of scientists, a lot of people engaged in the faculty. For us, this is insofar a unique day as, and I suspect this will be for a long time unique. The person in center of this type of ceremony has got applause when entering the room. Usually in these types of events, the applause will be at the end, but you are used to being applauded when you enter a stage. Thank you very much, and we can repeat this. Thank you. I'm here in a position of a guest because in German universities we say, Promotion ist das Proprium der Fakultäten. So promotion is in the center of giving awards, giving PhD degrees is the topic of faculties. Topic of faculties in universities and also in institutions which have the university stage, and these are in Saarland 2 institutions, which is our high school or our university for music and our university for arts and other types of activities which are new in this area, like new media, etc. So we have three institutions being able to deliver a PhD, and I very much hope that this will be it. This is just kind of a secret for some other people being in this room. I think that being able to deliver PhD degrees should stay in the hands of those institutions I mentioned. For us, you in a way represent a person that is known by our ears, that is valued by our hearts, and this is reflected by our minds. Because in your activities, you reach all these three areas, our ears in your wonderful presentations, our hearts, because music is emotional, and our minds, because you interpret literature. You interpret literature in the area of music, and this is for us a kind of representation that we consider music area as an area which is very close to science and very close to what this university is about. But moreover, and this is, I think, what made us or what convinced us your position in the area of supporting medical research in a very relevant area. This is what is convincing and what we are all grateful that you are so active in this area. This combination caused the project, and I thank very much to my dear Professor Roemer, the Dean of the faculty, who is responsible for today's ceremony, that this combination was convincing in your faculty too, and this was, I think, no question when Professor Kleinertz approached his dean that this would be a fantastic project. And I have to admit, there have been times I could not believe that this honor would fall onto our side as it finally turned out. So thank you very much for accepting this, and thank you very much for, from a few minutes on, you will be in a way a representative of Saarland University. We are very, very honored. Thank you very much.
Estimado Señor Carreras, Minister, Excellences, professors, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor Thank you very much. It's a great honor, pleasure, and privilege to provide you today with a brief overview on the accomplishments at the José Carreras Center for Immunotherapy and Gene Therapy at the University of Saarland Medical Center in Hamburg, a research institute that is dedicated exclusively to the fight of cancer. Owing to the wonderful generosity of José Carreras, the foundation to this center, equipped with about 700 square meters of laboratory space, was laid in April 2004, and the official setting to work was in November of the following year. So, what has been accomplished since then at the José Carreras Center in Hamburg? Well, today there are 6 research groups of the Department of Internal Medicine 1 permanently residing in the Carreras Center. Since its start in 2005, more than 140 high-ranking scientific publications have been produced by these groups, often in collaboration with numerous colleagues in Europe and abroad. Moreover, more than 20 young investigators have received their diploma and doctoral degrees at this institute in the past 7 years. It is, of course, impossible to acknowledge all the scientific achievements here. However, I therefore decided to single out one very recent, internationally highly visible achievement by the group of Michael Freundschel and give you a little more detail on it. The discovery of cellular target proteins that are recognized by paraproteins, which is nothing else but antibodies, from certain B-cell cancers. Don't worry, I will be as explicit and as understandable as possible, I hope. Well, usually, if bacteria enter a human body, these bacteria are attacked by cells that are called macrophages. Now, these macrophage cells eat bacteria and they digest bacteria. And what they do with the bacteria is, after digestion, is present the bacterial proteins on the surface of their cells. Okay? And these proteins then are recognized by very important type of cell of the immune system. And this is called B cell. B cells have a structure on their surface, as you can see here. These are called B cell receptors, which are able to recognize proteins presented by macrophages. And then these B cells are induced to proliferate, to grow. And they are induced to produce antibodies. These antibodies, of course, are then floating in the bloodstream and are able to attack the invaders, the bacteria. However, sometimes these cells can become cancer cells. These B cells then proliferate in an uncontrolled way. And it seems that for constant proliferation, these B cells require the stimulus by proteins. They need to see proteins to be ignited to proliferate. So, in order to fight these cancers, of course, it would be very important to know which proteins precisely are recognized by cancer B cells. Okay? So this need not necessarily have to be proteins from bacteria. These can also be proteins from the human body. So one question that we addressed in the past years was, is it possible to regularly and with certainty identify proteins that are recognized by this particular type of B cell cancer? Okay, So what did we do? One important unsolved problem was how to find these proteins that help these cancer cells grow. And here is one of the strategies that were used by us at the José Carreras Center. Well, humans produce about 30,000 different kinds of proteins. And then there is also a zillion of bacterial and viral proteins. So ideally, one would take all of these 30,000 human proteins and the viral proteins and spot or dot them individually on such membranes. This is a membrane, and what one would do is dot these different proteins individually onto this membrane. Okay? After that, this membrane then is incubated with the blood serum from cancer patients, where the antibodies are present. Now, these antibodies, of course, as I just showed you before, recognize specifically, ideally, only one protein, namely the protein that they can recognize and need as a signal to grow. Does this work? Does this procedure work? Yes, it does. This is an example. What you can see here is such a membrane, and all these many white spots you see here, they are all different human proteins. And sometimes, after incubation with an antibody, you see that there are certain dots showing up where the antibody binds. And these dots are proteins that are recognized by the antibody. Okay? And since we know precisely which protein was loaded onto which position on this membrane, we identify this protein that way. Now here in this particular case, this protein that was discovered has the name SLP2. This is stomatin-like protein 2. Now, surprisingly, and what was unexpected, is that this protein is in cancer cells, in cancer patients, different than in all of us, in most of us. Now, this SLP2 protein is present in all of us, of course, but what is the difference between normal individuals and cancer patients? Now, the interesting point is, when you look here, when you try to separate these proteins in an electrical field, you see that the proteins from cancer patients, these are the ones that are marked with an asterisk. These proteins move a little bit different than the proteins from normal controls. Okay? So the SLP2 proteins in cancer patients are different than the SLP2 proteins in most of us. This is due to a chemical modification. We don't need to go into the details here, but this modification is actually the addition of a phosphate group. So, and it was surprising, absolutely surprising, to learn that this difference in the SLP2 protein runs in families. As you can see here, this is a family tree of a family. The circles are females, the rectangles are males, and the circles and rectangles that are marked in red are the ones that have this shift that I showed you before. And some of these people get blood cancer. Some of these people have a chance of getting blood cancer, an 8-fold increased risk for getting blood cancer simply because they have this shifted protein. Okay? So this was a landmark discovery by Michael Fornschuh's group. Now, all of this wouldn't have been possible without the wonderful generosity of our guest of honor today. And again, in the name of Michael Fornschuh, and in particular of the many young people that were involved in this project and contributed substantially to this project, I would like to thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
The protagonists of the next approximately 30 minutes will be two Spaniards. One, a 16th century Spanish infant, and the other, a late 20th, early 21st century musician. Both met firstly in 1976, when the second interpreted the first. The encounter was repeated many times during the next years. Here a short example. José Carreras was born 1946 in Barcelona. In 1970, having finished his musical education in his native city, he sang a minor role in Vincenzo Bellini's Norma. The singer of the title role, Montserrat Caballé, was so enthusiastic about his voice that he was to sing with her the same year his first principal role, Gennaro, in Gaetano Donizetti's Lucrezia Borgia. In 1975, he gave his debut at the Royal Opera House Covent Garden with Alfredo Germont in Verdi's La Traviata. The same year followed his debut at the Wiener Staatsoper as Duke in Verdi's Rigoletto. With his interpretation of Riccardo in Verdi's Un ballo in maschera at the Scala in 1975, he attracted the interest of Herbert von Karajan was of crucial importance for his career during the next years. Under his direction, he sang the tenor part in Verdi's Missa da Requiem at the Salzburg Easter Festival 1976, and the same year at the Summer Festival the title role in Verdi's Don Carlos. His uncomparable interpretation of this extremely difficult role is for many specialists an ideal, especially because he passed over the limits of his more lyrical repertoire until then towards a heavier tenore spinto role. The historical Don Carlos was the eldest son of King Philip II of Spain. Carlos was born in 1545 at Valladolid. His mother, Maria Manuela of Portugal, daughter of John III, died a month after his birth. The young infant Carlos was delicate and deformed. As a young adult, he began to show signs of mental instability. Many of his physical and psychological afflictions may have stemmed from the inbreeding common to the House of Habsburg and the royal houses of Portugal and Spain, another type of family. Carlos had only 4 great-grandparents instead of the maximum of 8, and only 6 great-great-grandparents instead of the maximum of 16. In 1559, Carlos was betrothed to Elizabeth of Valois, eldest daughter of King Henry II of France. For political reasons, she then married King Philip, but there is, however, absolutely no sign of any sort of love affair between Carlos and his stepmother. 3 other brides were suggested for the prince: Mary Stuart, Queen of Scots, Margaret of Valois, youngest daughter of Henry II of France, and Anna of Austria, who was to later become Philip's 4th wife. Carlos often attended meetings of the Council of State, which dealt with foreign affairs, and was in correspondence with the Netherlands regent Margaret of Parma. In 1562, Carlos fell down a flight of stairs which caused serious head injuries. After his recovery, he became wild and unpredictable in his behavior. Carlos possibly made contacts with representatives of the Count Egmont from the Low Countries, a leading figure in the revolt against Spain. He also exhibited an antipathy towards his father, whose murder, according to Carlos' confessor, he once supposedly contemplated. In the autumn of 1567, he made preparations to flee to the Netherlands. These plans, however, were revealed to King Philip by Don Juan de Austria. In January 1568, Carlos was arrested and placed in solitary confinement on his father's orders. He died in isolation 6 months later. It was later claimed that he was poisoned on the orders of King Philip, but modern historians assume that Carlos died of more or less natural causes, especially eating and drinking disorders during his imprisonment. Apparently, Carlos was not at all the noble character depicted by later literary sources. Foreign ambassadors reported repeatedly the unfavorable impression he made. The first to depict him as a noble character in unfortunate love with his stepmother was the French diplomat and writer César Vichard de Saint-Réal. After some minor works written in order to win the protection of Louis XIV, in 1672 he published Don Carlos, subtitled Nouvelle Historique. Saint-Réal mixes politics and love. Nowadays, French critics consider him as an important figure in the construction of the French psychological novel. In Saint-Réal's novel, Carlos, as well as his stepmother, are victims of Philip's jealousy and revenge. The reason for this new interpretation of Carlos as a noble hero, victim of his heartless father, was apparently the problem of the Spanish succession since the death of Philip IV in 1665. It was evident that Philip's only son, Charles II, would not be able to have children. Louis XIV, married to a Spanish princess, was well aware of the danger that Spain, with all its territories in the Low Countries, Italy, and overseas, would fall to the Austrian Habsburgs. France would have been isolated again, as in times of Emperor Charles V. In this situation, when Louis XIV claimed his own rights upon the Spanish throne, a novel denigrating the Habsburg dynasty as cruel and heartless even within their family was an important and very successful piece of propaganda. About a century later, Saint-Réal's novel should become the fundamental source for Friedrich Schiller's Don Carlos. Schiller worked out this historical tragedy in 5 acts since 1783 and produced it for the first time in Hamburg in 1787. The contemporary view upon this drama can be shown best quoting the preface of the first English translation from 1798. It is known that this unhappy prince was put to death at the age of 23 by command of his father under cover of a sentence of the Inquisition. Carlos had conceived a violent resentment against the Duke of Alba and the other ministers of Philip, who advised the bloody persecution of the Protestants in the Netherlands. To these political reasons for Philip's unnatural hatred of his son, some authors have added that of jealousy. Carlos, they pretend, could never divest himself of that affection for his stepmother, which the prospect of an union with her had formerly created in his breast. And Philip, seeing or imagining in the queen a return of love for the prince, sacrificed his wife and son to his suspicions. Connected as these events are with the great revolution which delivered Europe from the tyranny of the Romish Church, Schiller has not in his Don Carlos composed a work adapted to theatrical representation, but has rather given a dramatic form to those great leading principles and events which he wished to hold up as important lessons to mankind. Verdi's Don Carlos was originally a 5-act grand opera composed to a French libretto by Camille Dulocle and Joseph Méry. The libretto is based on Schiller's drama. It was commissioned and produced by the Paris Opera and premiered at the Salle Le Pelletier in 1867. Over the following 20 years, cuts and additions were made to the opera, resulting in at least 7 different versions. No other Verdi opera exists in so many versions. At its full length, including the ballet and the cuts made before the first performance, it contains about 4 hours of music and is Verdi's longest opera. Verdi's Don Carlos is not just an opera adaptation of Schiller's play. In the course of the 19th century, the interest in the subject had considerably changed. The basic conflict was no longer that between freedom based on reason on the one hand and oppression based on governmental and ecclesiastical power on the other hand, but that between civil government and the Roman Church. Thus, Verdi's Don Carlos reflects the fundamental conflict between the new unified state of Italy and the Roman Church. when Verdi decided to compose Don Carlos in 1865, Italy was recently unified. Since 1861, Italy was a constitutional kingdom under the Savoy king Vittorio Emanuele II, with the capital Rome, which, however, reigned by Pope Pius IX, until 1870 was not part of the kingdom. In 1864, this pope had published his famous encyclica Quanta Cura, where he condemned any sort of democracy and insisted in the superiority of ecclesiastical law above all civil legislation. Verdi, who was a deputy in the first Italian parliament, was deeply involved in this conflict, which finally led to the threat of excommunication of Catholics which took part in the new Italian state, as deputies or as ministers or any other form. Whereas at the end of Schiller's Don Carlos, Carlos is handed over by the king to ecclesiastical power, Verdi insists on the conflict between Philip and the church. In their famous duet, King Philip criticizes the Grand Inquisitor for his arrogance. And at the end, with the appearance of Emperor Charles V, ecclesiastical power turns out to be inferior to a higher force which might be called natural law, the basis of what we call today human rights. In this context, Carlos is more reacting than acting on his own. We saw already his only solo scene unveiling his desperate situation at the beginning of the opera. Posa then kindles in him the desire to go to Flanders. There he could help the oppressed people and forget his love for Elizabeth. As we know, the plan fails. And it is mainly Carlos' indecision between his love and the conscience of his duty which condemns him to passivity. Only once in the auto da fe scene he acts, drawing his sword against his father, but this is evidently a vain act of despair which leads to his imprisonment. His other appearances in the opera are mainly two large love duets with his stepmother, where he unveils his unstable character. Let us return finally to the other protagonist of my talk. José Carreras' shaping of the main characters in the operas of Giuseppe Verdi and many others, for instance Massenet's Werther, are milestones in the history of opera by their vocal elegance, their musical brilliance, and the morbidezza of phrasing. His career was cruelly interrupted with a diagnosis of leukemia in 1987. José Carreras describes his illness and recovery in his autobiography Cantar con el alma, Singing from the Soul. In 1988, he founded the José Carreras International Leukemia Foundation in Barcelona. In 1995, the Deutsche José Carreras Leukämie-Stiftung. In the course of his career, José Carreras recorded many other operas which are scarcely staged, but without which our concept of 19th century music would be incomplete. So, for instance, Verdi's Il Corsaro, I due Foscari, La battaglia di Legnano, Un giorno di regno, Stefelio, and Jerusalem, the latter with Katia Ricciarelli and another famous singer who is present today, Zygmunt Nimsgan. Above all, his singing is always a result of intensive study and understanding, a true interpretation comparable to hermeneutical musicological research. In his musical season in Paris, 1843, the poet Heinrich Heine poses the following question: what is the highest achievement in art? His answer: the same which is the highest achievement in any other manifestation of life, the self-conscious freedom of human mind. Not only a piece of music composed in the plenitude of that self-consciousness, but also the mere performance of the same can be regarded as the highest achievement in art if it pervades us with that breath of eternity, manifesting the same free plenitude of mind between the performer and the composer, showing that he, the performer, is also a free man. José Carreras' marvelous interpretations, documented in a multitude of recordings, are indeed pervaded by that breath of eternity, without which music would be only part of the past and musicology mere historiography. They are a challenge to our academic discipline to search in music for that breath, to interpret music intellectually, and to preserve our musical heritage, with which since the Middle Ages is an integral part of Europe's cultural identity. Considering José Carreras' important contribution to European music, Saarland University wishes to honor today a great European artist and man. Ad multos annos. I would like now to ask our new Doctor Honoris Causa, the Dean of our faculty, Professor Peter Riemer, and our President to come on stage for the handing over of the charter.
It's a great pleasure for me to give you in a few minutes this sheet of paper with the award of our faculty. And I'll speak a little bit, reading it in Latin as it is. I hope that this Latin is not Greek to you. I hope so, yes? We in German say it's very Spanish if we don't understand something. But this is very clear Latin. Quod bonum felix faustumque Universitatis Studiorum Arabicae, Praesidente Vol Caroline Weber, Philosophiae, Doctore Psychologiae Professore, ex decretu ordinis philosophorum primi, facultatis historicarum, culturaliumque disciplinarum, promotor rite constitutus, Peter Riemer, Philosophiae Doctor, Philologiae Classicae Professor, Ordinis Philosophorum Decanus, in Dominum ornatissimum, José Carreras, Barcinonensem, natum nonis decembribus, anno millesimo, nongentesimo, quadragesimo sexto, the 5th of December, 1946, quod de arte musica benemeritus est, eaque ars quantum valeat apud societatem humanam assidue ostendit. Doctoris nomen philosophiae honoris causa, eoque cum nomine jura dignitatem contulit, eademque con lata esse publico hoc diplomate philosophorum ordinis obsignatione comprobato declaravit. Datum Saravi Ponti ante the day today, yes, ante diem tertium idus junias anno bis millesimo duo decimo Universitatis Saraviniensis Praeses Ordinis Philosophorum Primi Decanus. Congratulor tibi.
So, dear Minister, Commerçant for Education and Culture, dear Susanne Reichrath, representative of the Premier of the Saarland and the Minister of Science, Research and Technology, dear Dean, Professor Linnenberger, dear President, dear President, Professor Linnenberger, and of course, dear Dean, Professor Rimmer, dear Professor Kleiner, head of the Department of Musicology, dear Professor Roemer, manager of the José Carreras Center for Immuno and Gene Therapy, Professor Dewey, thank you very much for your wonderful interpretation of a composer that is very close to my heart because of being Catalan. Thank you. Professors, students, and friends of the University of Saarland. Let me first convey to you my deepest gratitude for your very generous gesture honoring me with the title of Doctor Honoris Causa of the University of Saarland. It is a great honor. It is a great honor for me to be part of this institution and hope to be a good representative of it from now on. The light is not great here. Thank you. I must also take the opportunity to thank again the University of Saarland for its support to the José Carreras Center for Immuno and Gene Therapy in Hamburg, which we are very proud of. This is for us a very important project, as Professor Dr. Roemer has very well explained. Ever since it was founded in 1948, the University of Saarland, located on the German-French border, has been an example of cultural and educational exchange after the Second World War. Transcending boundaries has been a hallmark of Saarland University. No matter whether these are geographical borders, cultural boundaries, or barriers between academic disciplines. And for me, this is a sign of evolution towards a world in which exchange, solidarity, and cooperation are the key to the better future we all hope. I wish to thank again Professor Dewey for his brilliant interpretation, and Professor Kleiner for his interesting speech about Don Carlos. Needless to say, Don Carlos is an extraordinary opera, and I had the privilege to sing such opera in many special occasions in the best opera houses of the world. I remember singing it for the first time with Maestro Claudio Abbado at La Scala from Milano, from the bicentennial of the theater. I also had the pleasure to sing it with Maestro von Karajan in Salzburg. The recording which I have seen is one of those performances. And I also sang it in other places in Europe, at the Royal Opera House in London, at the Vienna Staatsoper, in Munich, in Hamburg, in Berlin. So it's an opera very close to me, a very special one. This Doctor Honoris Causa touches me deeply, not only due to its high level, but also as it acknowledges both my modest contribution to music and my determination to support scientific research in the fight against leukemia. Music and science are absolutely complementary. Science heals the body, while music heals the soul and moves people's hearts. Knowledge is part of the essence of human condition, and so is emotion, and it's particularly meaningful to me that today's event combines music, the emotion it raises, and the university spirit. Including music in this event makes me feel even more at home and underlines the important links between quality education and performing arts. Since I was a child, I felt enormously attached and attracted to music, and I am very fortunate to have been able to devote my professional life to it. I feel very grateful to every unforgettable moment I have had the chance to live thanks to music. It would be a great honor for me to be remembered one day for such passion. When I was 40, in the best moment of my career, I was diagnosed with leukemia. It was, of course, a difficult episode. My recovery gave me a new reason to be grateful, in this case, to science and society for the crucial help I was fortunate to receive. From there on, the fight against leukemia has become a priority in my life. It is a crusade in which my family and many dearest scientists, artistic colleagues and friends have joined me. My professional commitments worldwide have given me the opportunity to try to increase people's awareness towards the fight against leukemia. Today, there are over 19 million people in the world who have voluntarily joined the International Registry of Bone Marrow Donors. Our foundation has thousands of very committed supporters that make us grow and able to fund more services for patients and for the scientific community. The creation of the José Carreras International Leukemia Foundation in 1988 in Barcelona was just the first step of a crusade that is still vigorous and a strong motivation to deploy our efforts in as many directions as possible. A remarkable landmark of this process was the creation of the Deutsche José Carreras Leukämie-Stiftung. Since 1995, our Stiftung has benefited from the solidarity of the German society, mainly through the 17 successful and successive editions of our ARDE Christmas Gala, and of course the generosity of hundreds of thousands of donors. The German society is not only a world leader in the healthcare and research field. Germany is a country that has treated me with extreme warmth and affection throughout my artistic career. I have had the chance to sing in many cities in the most varied and prestigious venues. The Germans are devoted to music and to opera, and for a tenor, there is no place better to be and to perform. Our foundation and me personally have tried to transform this affection into tangible help for the patients and the scientists in the most effective and transparent way. We have found more than 900 projects in research, healthcare and social areas, transplant units, cord blood banks, day clinics, rehabilitation centers, youth camps, residence for patients and their families, as well as hundreds of research projects made possible by our Stiftung and the donors. And this project can be found around Germany, all over Germany. I am very grateful that you named after me the Zentrums für Immuno and Gene Therapy at the Clinical Hospital of the University of Saarlandes. I do not forget, though, that the most important protagonists of the work performed there are the patients and, of course, the professionals. Let's hope that the facility brings them hope and progress. Being in front of such an exclusive audience, I can no less than encourage all those students who dedicate their efforts to scientific research to continue working hard for such tasks. I could say I'm speaking to you today thanks to many, many persons worldwide who have anonymously devoted their lives to help other human beings through scientific research. Since I was cured from leukemia in the late 80s, many advances in the field have been achieved. Nowadays, over 80% of the children and 50% of adults win the battle against leukemia. I can assure you that the work of scientists and healthcare professionals will continue to receive the most determined support of our institution until leukemia is one day a totally curable disease. Now, after more than 25 years of intense work supporting research worldwide, bone marrow donation and social services for leukemia patients and their families, I must say this commitment is the most rewarding endeavor I ever made as a human being. Finally, let me just add that I joyfully accept the generous award you are conferred on me, sharing it with all the persons who devote their life and their sensitivity towards helping those human beings suffering from such a severe, terrible disease. Thank you again for your affection. Thanks a lot.